As of recently, I have come under fire from the more reactionary elements of the Patriotic Socialist movement. They accuse me of practicing synthetic leftism because I dare uphold a woman's right to have autonomy over her own person relative to questions that pertain to her reproductive health. When they cite in return that socialist and anti-imperialist entities in Nicaragua and Iran are against abortion. Well, you know what? That's good for Nicaragua and Iran. But you know what? We're not Nicaragua and we're not Iran. We're the United States, a culturally centrist country with secular laws. Deal with it. They get mad at me because I uphold our LGBTQ comrades who have long struggled for liberation and acceptance under both capitalist and socialist conditions, and who are fighting to end neoliberalism. Earlier in the week, I came under attack by very bad faith actors within the Patriotic Socialist movement, and this by no means defines the whole. Don't get defensive. Who equate homosexual lifestyles with being on par with incest, a genetic defect, bourgeois decadence, and a byproduct of synthetic leftism. These folks believe that because Stalin and other socialist leaders implemented suppressive policies towards homosexuality more than half a century ago, during the same time when the public thought that smoking wouldn't cause lung cancer, that those same policies hold true today. This is utterly demented. Listen, I had a trans family member who was murdered, strangled, and stuffed under a mattress. Would you think that in a million years I would want to align myself with these types of people who would want to wish that reality on others because they perceive it as capitalist decadence? Think about that. They get mad at me because I also denounce anti-Semitism that is shoehorned into our criticisms of the capitalist system. Case in point, just because the Rothschild dynasty has historically operated on behalf of the materialistic interests of European aristocracy and royalty does not mean we condemn the Jewish people as a whole for the reprehensible actions of a particular banking dynasty that is more WASP in its character than it is Jewish. I'm going to say this very bluntly, and some will not like hearing this, but there are some very bad faith actors within the Patriotic Socialist movement. This does not mean that I agree with Vosh, Thought Slime, Black Like Mao, Jason Unruhe, Danke Kang, Socialism for All, or any of these other pathetic, ridiculous, tactless personalities whose sole purpose is to misdirect and mislead people into embracing the agenda of the upper levels of capitalism disguised as perverted leftism. As you know, I also find the CPUSA going through all this effort to attack the Patriotic Socialist movement to be lacking nuance. Caleb Maupin is not a bad person or a secret Nazi. Personally, I think he can be a little tone deaf at times, and sometimes he can also lack self-awareness. But I don't hold that against him. Everybody has their flaws. But he's no Richard Spencer and should stop being treated and viewed as such. I also don't get that sense from Peter Coffin. I don't think he's a bad person either. I don't know him well enough to levy constructive criticisms, but he seems like a guy who is tired of wokeness on crack, and I agree with him on that, through and through. As far as Haas and Jackson Hinkle go, the jury is still out. But the jury is starting to make some decisions that are unfavorable towards them, especially if they can't purge the psychopathic, reactionary, anti-feminist, anti-gay, edgelord, 4chan elements out of their circles. I get it. These types are sexually frustrated. They're alienated by the hypocrisy and contradictions that come with hyper-political correctness and hypersexuality. And they embrace crass attitudes because it is a release for them. However, bread tube and synthetic leftists should not be allowed. 1 inch of validation when leaders of the Patriotic Socialist movement allow for and are encouraging these types to espouse their backward worldviews because someone rejected them or because they were pushed away by idiotic, dogmatic, one-dimensional synthetic leftists for being colonizers when they had no control over they were born, or being white supremacists because they don't think leftist adventurers calling themselves Antifa should burn down cities over a George Washington statue. That makes them look better. That makes BreadTube look better. Why would you want that? You built the Titanic. Good for you. But if you don't get your ship in order, some stupid fool drunk on his own ego is going to crash your ship into an iceberg. And you don't want that, do you? While centralization, self-discipline, and reining in toxic ultra-leftism that does more to divide the masses than unite the masses, and is used to advance the motives of the upper levels of capitalism under the guise of being left, is more than warranted. At the same time, we have to be accommodating within the confines of the aggregate culture. Wouldn't you know that without compromising 1 inch of my principles, I talk to Republicans and I talk to people who would be described as, alt-light. I ask them, what are the chances of Ted Cruz winning the nomination in 2024? You know what I get told? Ain't gonna happen. The base is never going to put another religious fundamentalist into office after what Bush did 20 years ago. So when I bring up that there are bad faith actors within the patriotic socialism spheres who think that LGBTQ people are genetically defective and a sign of bourgeois decadence and should be locked up or worse, you know what they tell me? You know what these people who are Trump voters and alt-light types tell me? They tell me these people are absolutely insane. While they aren't crazy about the whole issue involving bathroom controversies or being called transphobic for not wanting to date trans people, or this whole recent push by academia to normalize pedophilia in the form of minor attracted persons, they have absolutely no problem with homosexuality and gender nonconformity as long as it's between consenting adults and respects boundaries. So let's get this straight. The people who the synthetic left demonizes as fascists for voting for Trump are calling certain members of the Patriotic Socialist movement insane for being hostile towards homosexuality. That reveals two things. The synthetic left is wrong to incite fascist witch hunts towards people who don't want to vote for pro-globalization and postmodernist liberals, so that's why they voted for Trump. And that also reveals that the so-called conservatives aren't as socially conservative as some members of the Patriotic Socialist faction believe that they are. Some might think that they have their finger on the pulse of the masses, but thinking and knowing are two different things. Also, these people aren't anti-abortion on the premise that they're against the practice because they think it's immoral. No, they just don't want to pay for it with their taxes, which I vehemently disagree with on that aspect. But some people actually think they're going to win the masses over by promoting an outdated version of Marxism-Leninism interfused with moralistic Christian teachings, when most people, left and right, are secular and are only coming around to the idea that multinational capitalism is bad, but still haven't quite figured out that a government of action is needed to fight it, right? Newsflash. You're not going to beat social liberalism when so-called fascist right-wing Trump supporters are more socially liberal than you are. There is a lot of egoism being expressed by both the synthetic left and the more outspoken elements of patriotic socialism. Personalities like to brag about how many followers they have, how the other side is dumb, or they brag about the books they wrote or the places they visited, or about how they're making comrades, they're converting to the cause all over the world. That's nice. Good for you. You know, nobody really says a thing when I attack all the armchair pseudo-revolutionaries on the synthetic left for being liberal puppets. But when I criticize the Patriotic Socialist movement for going out of bounds, I don't hear the end of it. This is what I hear from some of the more fanatical types. You're jealous of Haas and Hinkle and the Patriotic Socialist movement. You don't know what it's like to build a grassroots movement. Stop alienating your allies. You're a synthetic leftist. You just talk and lecture. You can never be wrong, and you're too combative. Okay, kids. If we are all going to constantly stroke our own egos and brag about all of our actions and accomplishments and try to put down one another because we're going to be the glorious leader to lead the Second American Revolution and measure someone based upon their actions and accomplishments, let me tell you about some of my actions and accomplishments if we constantly want to engage in revolutionary dick-measuring contests. For the record, I am not jealous of Jackson, Hinkle, or Haas. Why would I be? Because they got tens of thousands of impressionable teenage and young 20-something followers on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch? Because they can organize a counterstrike to protest trans Netflix workers who staged a walkout over Dave Chappelle? Because they can antagonize synthetic leftists most effectively with provocative tweets? Wow. I'm so impressed. I really am. I wish I could do that. That's so impressive. I'm crushed. Very impressive. For those in their mid-20s. You know what I was doing in my mid-20s? 2011, I was organizing anti-military marches in protest of the genocide in Libya. We got at least 10,000 people in the streets, not a peep from the mainstream media. Then in September of that year, I was one of about 36 people who camped out in Zuccotti Park to protest Wall Street. On the 6th day of the encampment, I organized a cadre of 30-something individuals using garbage cans, brooms, and tarps to create a human tent around the media workstation because the NYPD wouldn't let us carry umbrellas and attempted to use a rainstorm to evict us from Zuccotti Park by forcing us across the street. So if we went across the street, you know what happened? They'd go into the park and they would kill Occupy Wall Street. And the Occupy encampment would end right there. You know what? The first day we had 2,000 people. By day 6, we had 30 people. We outsmarted a police force of 47,000 strong by creating a non-freestanding structure to protect ourselves and the media tent, our workstation, from the rainstorm. Yeah, my quick thinking prevented the Occupy encampment from dying on day 6. 1 month later, 30 people became 900 cities across 80 countries. It was the fastest, most viral movement in history at that time. We organized a movement that had communists, libertarians, anarchists, anti-war activists, yippies, hippies, conservatives, well, not the stupid ones, liberals, gay, straight, trans, black liberationists, and don't let the synthetic leftists fool you. They were there. Occupy the Hood, Malik Rahsaan, look them up. Indigenous activists and anyone who was pissed off about Wall Street. That's how you organize the masses. You don't set race against race, people against people, interest against interest, conservative against liberal. You don't do that. You organize people around a common line. That being neoliberalism is sucking the economic lifeblood out of everyone, and that people need to stand up to the 1%. You don't say, let's organize all the indigenous against society, or let's organize the trans-inclusive feminists against the TERFs, or speak of terms about living in a socialist country with no abortion, and then live in a capitalist country with abortion. All that divides people. It doesn't unite them. I know a thing or two about building mass movements that unites different people around common interests because I did build one. I ran with a group called the Light Brigade, not the light bright version with liberal messages that broadcasted on highways. No. I ran with a group of some of the most badass, kick-ass, revolutionary people you will ever meet. Most of them are not alive anymore. We had our tentacles wrapped in every affinity group relative to Occupy, from homeless encampments up to the DNC. We squatted in abandoned mansions. We had our own secret encampment under a bridge in an abandoned industrial park in Queens. We traveled around the country. Our group initiated street protests. We shut down New York. We shut down Chicago during the NATO protests. We shut down Tampa during the 2012 RNC. We shut down Charlotte during the DNC. We faced down marauders of machine gun-toting riot cops. We faced pepper spray, tear gas, LRADs, and physical police brutality. One of my comrades, they got plowed over by a police van and survived. Another comrade of mine got tackled by multiple police officers by warning the public about the NDAA in Grand Central Terminal on New Year's Eve. I took an NFL-style punt to the head by police officers in San Francisco just for filming them pinning protesters against a wall and hitting them with their sticks. Members from my group, also did other things other than protest. They put the first mutual aid tents in the ground in Staten Island immediately after Hurricane Sandy, and a week before FEMA came. I was there with my camera filming the hardest hit neighborhood in Staten Island, that being Cedar Grove, and interviewing volunteers and distressed residents begging for help a week before Anderson Cooper even showed up. Members from my group infiltrated Exxon-owned property that was off limits and exposed the oil spill in Mayflower, Arkansas, and got it on the mainstream media. While at the same time, I was with other members of the group waltzing about East Garfield Park and the Englewood neighborhoods of West and South Chicago, some of the roughest neighborhoods in the United States, exposing Rahm Emanuel's racist austerity programs towards Chicago's poorest and most disproportionately African-American neighborhoods, and shutting down public schools to turn them into for-profit private schools. And guess what? We got that on the mainstream media too. My group had FBI detail. We got harassed by the Secret Service. I got harassed by the Secret Service. Between us, we had at least 40 arrests. Our pictures were up on the wall in like a mafia hierarchy style in New York City's One Police Plaza. There's a reason why I talk and lecture, because when I was in my 20s, my group and I did way more shit than you could ever know or dream of, and were legitimately a threat to the establishment. Because if we weren't a threat, you'd think they would have come after us? And what I say doesn't come from arrogance, but from wisdom, and such a wisdom that is beyond your comprehension. My first arrest with 700 people for shutting down the Brooklyn Bridge made international news headlines. My picture was literally on the front page of every news website on the internet. Out of nearly 8 billion people on planet Earth, a select very few people can say that. And I'm one of those very select few people. Then some smartasses will say, well, you never wrote a book. Well, aside from the fact that I'm working on a manuscript about my Occupy days, I don't really need to write a book because there's already books out there that have entire subsections about me. There's a book called Protest Camps. Guess what? There's a subsection about me being part of that first generation of live video streamers. There's another book that's coming out next year that I did an interview for. Oh, who would have known? Yeah, another book that's written with a subsection about me. I'm cited in 4 PhD dissertations, numerous thesis papers. I've been featured in 2 documentaries, one for Russia Today and one for ORF Public Television Austria, and I'm currently working on another one. There were professors affiliated with Oxford, the University of London, Yale, Columbia, who came to me to learn about Occupy Wall Street, and I had my picture up in a museum in Paris for a year, and I did all of that before I was 30. I have done more and have rolled with people who have done more legitimate revolutionary stuff than Danky Kang, Socialism for All, Jason Unruhe, Black Like Mao, ContraPoints, Thought Slime, and Vosh, and any other fake armchair academic pseudo-leftist pushing out synthetic leftist bullshit. But on the flip side, I have also done more than Haas, Jackson Hinkle, and a lot of other personalities within patriotic socialism spheres who have a very, very long way to go. and a lot of hard lessons to learn before they can catch up to where I am. But you know what? I settled down. I became a tour guide. I love teaching people about New York and teaching people about social and class struggles in New York. It is my passion. All the stuff I did, it doesn't matter, because what matters is that I'm teaching people about authentic history in the form of a tour. I got involved with leftist discussions again in a limited capacity because I knew there was a fundamental problem with the left in this country and that it needed to be set on the correct course. The 99% is losing right now. They are set against each other. They are divided. They are scared. They are feeling hopeless. Meanwhile, as the upper levels of capitalism make trillions while no one looks except for conspiracy theorists and bad actors who blame it on the Jewish and a lack of Christian morality. I'm not here to tear down movements. I'm here to guide the ship so it doesn't hit an iceberg like how Occupy hit an iceberg. I'm here to guide the ship, to bring balance between class struggle and social struggle, and to get the 99% back on track. Not show patriotism for a country that should wither away, but to show patriotism for a country that is yet to be born, based on fairness, equality, charity, and compassion for the poor, the marginalized, and the exploited who live under the current order, and to crush the decadent order of yesteryear that was built on the oppression of those who were just mentioned. Our unity must not be based on archaic superstitions, but on new values and healthy traditions, which includes everyone. That is what patriotic socialism should be about. Any other interpretation, which includes some but not others, has no place in the movement and should be flushed out immediately. We are the 99%, and that means everyone. And we must include everyone because there is no other alternative. Flush the bad actors out. This is Comrade Pella, signing out.